So you want to wail on Ineffa. In this video, I'll be helping you guys decide which is the right way to wail on her. Should you go for Ineffa's Constellations first or her signature weapon first? I'm going to explain the benefits and the value for each one of them, and then finally I'm going to give you a final roadmap that I think will be more optimal for you to wail on her. But yeah, let's begin. Alright, so first of all, starting off with her signature weapon, Fractured Halo. This is going to be a normal 5-star polearm, basically. It's just going to have an average base attack, sort of. Going to have 608 at level 90. And then it's also going to have a crit damage substat, which is pretty good and universal. And it's going to be 66%. Now, from the passive, after you use an elemental skill or burst, it's going to give you a 24% attack increase for 20 seconds. So it's basically a good uptime, just attack increase, which is pretty good for Ineffa. And also, when you create a shield, it's going to make all of your party members deal 40% more lunar charge damage, which is pretty good for Ineffa's teams in general. All of them are going to be dealing more lunar charge damage, so it's going to be a good supportive buffer for Ineffa's own damage and also the rest of the party members' damage. So this is what this weapon is going to give you. The 40% damage bonus to lunar charge damage is going to be pretty valuable, that's for sure, and that's going to put it ahead of most weapons. That's like the differentiator between this weapon and the rest of the weapons. Other than that, it's just have crit damage and attack, which is not that important. In general though, in terms of damage increase, this weapon is going to be around like 17 to 25% damage increase, depending on which weapon you had before. Obviously 25% will be from like the free-to-play weapons like Battle of the Forts, for example, or whatever. If you have it, then in that case it's probably going to be a 25% damage increase, which is pretty huge, and around 17, 15, 16% from the rest of the 5-star weapons, like the good ones. For example, if you have Staff of the Scarlet Sands, for example, Battle of the Forts, Calamity Queller, stuff like that, it's going to be around like a 15, 17 up to like 18% damage increase from these weapons, which is just a little bit higher than average from like the usual 5-star weapons. But yeah, it's a pretty good weapon, and it's also gonna buff your team, so it's not only for Ineffa. Keep in mind it's also gonna buff the rest of your team's damage, which is the lunar reaction, which is pretty good. Per refinement, it's gonna add in like a 6% damage increase, also pretty usual for any 5-star weapon, but in general it's a good weapon in my opinion, mostly for its supportive capabilities. Buffing the damage of all the characters on your team, not just Ineffa's lunar charged reactions, is gonna be pretty good, because you're going to play in like electro charged teams. In a lot of cases, other characters than Ineffa might trigger the lunar charged reactions like completely on their own, like another electro enabler and then another hydro enabler. They can trigger a reaction, and this reaction is going to be boosted by Ineffa's weapon. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty good weapon, and it's going to be buffing Ineffa, giving her what she needs, and also buffing the usual characters. I wouldn't say it's very universal though, so it's a good crit damage statistic, and it's going to have average base attack, so it's not that bad. And the attack increase is going to work just when you do your elemental burster skill, so that's decently available, I guess, for a lot of characters. It's also going to last for 20 seconds, which is a good amount of time, but you need to create a shield for you to have like the lunar charge thing, and it's not even going to be useful in a lot of cases if you're not playing like a lunar charge team. So this weapon won't be like the most universal weapon in the planet, but I'd say it's like decently universal though, so it's not a bad weapon to get for your account, that's for sure. It's just going to give you crit damage and usually attack, which is pretty good for a lot of, you know, characters in general. Alright, so now moving on to her constellations, I'm going to explain them pretty quickly, see what value they give you, what do they do, and then how much damage they're going to give you, like the damage increase. Her first constellation is basically just that when you activate her shield, it's going to increase the lunar charge damage for all of your party members by 2.5% for every 100 attack that Ineffa's going to have. Obviously, you're going to be building attack on her, so this is going to be quite a bit. You can reach a maximum of 50% pretty easily usually. So an extra 50% damage increase is going to be pretty good for sure. But yeah, obviously it's going to buff Ineffa's own damage because she's going to be dealing lunar charge damage, and it's also going to buff some of the lunar charge damage created by other teammates on your team, which is pretty good. Generally it's going to depend on the team obviously, but I would say it's going to be around an 18% damage increase from C0, which is super good in my opinion, that's for sure. Especially for a C1, it's a decent C1 for sure. Now C2 is that after you use your elemental bursts and it hits opponents, it's going to put a status on one of the hit opponents, and you can wait a little bit or when you attack the opponent for you to trigger it faster. Nearby opponents next to this opponent affected are going to take AoE electro damage equal to 300% of Ineffa's attack, and it's going to be considered lunar charge damage, so all of the buffs and stuff like that are going to be applied on it, which is pretty good. So basically it's going to turn an opponent into like a node where you can attack further opponents with it, which is super good. 300% is going to be a huge like scalar and multiplier. Remember, the lunar charge is going to be able to crit and stuff like that, so yeah, keep that in mind. It's going to be a lot of damage for sure. And then also when you do your elemental burst, you're going to gain the shield of your party members. You won't need to do your skill, so you can just wait for your burst, press it, and everything is going to be set. The shield is going to trigger, you're going to hit opponents, it's going to deal damage and stuff like that. It might make her a little easier to play in some rotations maybe, which is pretty good. Either way, the damage increase, as I said, is going to be pretty decent. It's going to be around the 20% damage increase or more, which is pretty good, especially for C2. Also, the AoE potential is going to be pretty good, so yeah. Now, C3 is just going to increase level of your elemental skill. It's just some extra damage, I guess, and then the shield strength. That's pretty much it. In terms of damage wise, it's going to give you like a 1% damage increase. It's definitely not that good, but it's going to increase your shield strength a little bit, so I guess that's there. That's like a potential value, but in general, I wouldn't really say it's a good constellation in my opinion. Your shield is already fine, and you don't need it stronger, and the damage increase is just not going to be worth it at all. So yeah, C3 is just a usual level constellation. I don't think it's worth it for Ineffa. C4 is that when your own party members trigger the lunar charged reactions, Ineffa is going to recover 5 elemental energy, and this effect can occur once every 4 seconds, which is pretty good. It's just going to be extra energy. Obviously, it's going to be helping you out with the energy, but her burst is not going to cost a lot. It's already 60 energy, especially if you already have some energy recharge. You're probably going to burst on uptime. They're not really going to need any extra energy like that, especially for a full constellation. I think it's lacking a little bit. It should have had like extra thing or anything like that, but yeah, I don't think energy alone is going to be something worth it for Ineffa. She doesn't really have any energy problems, so yeah, I wouldn't really say it's worth it at all. Obviously, damage increase is going to be 0 because you can burst on uptime even without this constellation, so it's not really going to matter at all. C5 is just going to increase the level of your elemental bursts. It's just going to result in some more extra damage, but it's not a lot at all. It's going to be like a 2% damage increase. It's just like the initial hits, so it's definitely not worth it either. And then finally, C6, when she's affected by the effects from her C1, she can deal AoE electro damage equal to 135% of her attack, obviously off field. And that damage is going to be considered lunar charge damage, and it can trigger every 3.5 seconds. That's going to make her a much better off field like sub DPS, but it's just extra damage really. It's going to be a lot of extra damage, that's for sure. And with that scaling too, with her completely off field, it's going to turn her into a beast, like probably one of the best off field sub DPSs in the game, that's for sure. It's going to result in around like a 38% damage increase, which is super good by the way, especially for C6. That's definitely going to be pretty good, but I don't think it's really necessary honestly. I mean, she's a support in general, more like an enabler for the lunar charge, so yeah, that's going to provide extra damage, which is always appreciated, but it's not going to fit her like role very well. Probably better to get like a competent DPS, and that's probably going to result in more damage than you get in her C6, because C6 is just very expensive. But yeah, either way, it's a good C6 if you have it. It's definitely not bad. It's basically just extra damage, and it's gonna make her a beast off field, just, you know, damage applicator. That's pretty much it. Alright, so now for the final conclusion, which should you get first? How should you whale for Ineffa? As we can see, those are the charts here, and we can see that her signature weapon and her constellations are gonna have, you know, close increases, especially the early constellations. Obviously, signature weapon is gonna depend on which weapon you had before, but on average, they're gonna be pretty close. That's why, in my opinion, I would recommend just going for the weapon because it's more universal. You know, having an extra weapon on your account is probably better than just having constellations on a character. So when the damage increase is close, I always recommend just going for the weapon instead of the constellation. So between R1 and C1, I would probably recommend just getting R1. It's gonna basically give you the same thing as C1. C1 is gonna give you a 50% damage increase to lunar charge reaction to your whole team, and then the weapon is gonna give you 40% plus some attack plus the crit damage and stuff like that, and it's a whole weapon on your account. And that's especially if you don't have a super good like 5-star weapon already. If you have like Staff of the Scarlet Sands or something like that, it might be a little, you know, tempting to just go for C1, but if you don't have a very good weapon on Ineffa, I would recommend just going for her weapon straight away. And then after that, I would recommend going C1 obviously, and then C2. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend just going further than C2 like at all. It's just not worth it in my opinion. Literally 3 constellations after it are gonna have basically no value. It's just either 1 or 2% damage increase or completely useless energy. So it's definitely not that, you know, valuable. It's not useless energy, but it's not needed. And 3 constellations are going to be pretty painful. The only constellation worth it after that is going to be C6, but I really don't think it's worth it to go through all of these just to get some extra damage from C6. I think Ineffa is probably one of the most characters where you're incentivized to just stop at C2 in a while. I genuinely don't see why you would go beyond that. But either way, if you want to go for C6, it's definitely not bad. It's pretty good, but I don't think the bad there is worth it. Honestly, it's one of the rarest characters where I think weapon refinements are going to be more valuable than constellations, because at least they're going to give you like a 6% damage increase. So yeah, I'd recommend just stopping at C2. If you're not planning for C6 and you still want to invest in her, like you want to get one extra thing, I definitely recommend getting her weapon constellations. I think they're going to be more valuable if you want to get like R2 or R3. Or if you want to go for C6, then you can go just straight to C6 and stay at R1. But personally, I'd recommend just skipping all. R1 C2 is gonna be perfect. I would say even at C0, she's very playable. None of her constellations are really gonna change anything. They're not gonna change her mechanics. They're not really gonna make anything like that much easier. It's basically just like extra damage, really. Maybe C2 is gonna make her rotations a little easier, but I don't think it's that needed in most teams. So yeah, I think Ineffa is one of the most free-to-play friendly characters. You don't need her constellations at all, especially for her role. And if you want to invest in her a little bit, C2 R1 is the way to go. Tell me what you guys are getting in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.